Okay, welcome to CS 435 class. This is data structure and algorithm using Java. In this lectures, we're going to cover array. So our main objective is to learn about arrays. Also, we are going to explore how to declare and manipulate data into arrays. We're also going to understand the meaning of array index out of bound. Also, we're going to learn about multidimensional arrays. So first, we start with the definition of an array. And as we said earlier, again, array is a data structure, one of the basic data structure. And the elements in the array must have the same data type. And also we have to specify the size of the array. So the size is a face size. So here we say array is a structure data type with a face number of components, which means the size is face. We have to specify the size. Also, every component or element in an array must have the same data type. Also, the component can be accessed using their relative positions, which we normally call the index. So this is the syntax to instantiate an array. We have the data type, the square bracket open and close, and then the array name. Then we are going to use the new to allocate the memory space for the array. Then the int ESP is the size of the array. Now, instead of having these two lines, we can make everything one line by having the data type, the open and close square bracket, the array name equal to new data type, and the size of the array. So here now we have two arrays that we specified, array name 1 and also array name 2. Now, the syntax to access an array components, as we said earlier, we use the index. That's the position of each value or items in the array. So here I may have the array name, then I have to specify the position. Again, all the elements in the array will have the same name. The difference is the index will be different. Index specify the position of the item. So we have another example here. We have an array name num. The data type is int, and the size is 5. So if we get this array declaration, this is what the operating system will give us. So we start from 0 to 4, the index, because we have 5 items. The array name is num, the first item, the index is 0. Here we create the array without giving it any value. So initially, all the elements in the array will be 0 because the data type is int. From here, we can use the index or the position of the element to assign value. Like for example, here we have array name list. So we say list 3, which is the index is 3, which means the 4th item in the list. We assign 10 to it using the assignment operator. Also, we assign 35 to list 6, which will be the 7th item or the 7th position. And also the same thing for the 6th position, which is list 5. We use the assignment operator, assign 45 to it. Now here we can specify array size during a program execution. So example here, we have a variable name array size. This variable will tell us the size of the array. And next we have system.out.print, giving instruction that we should enter the size of the array. So we use this scanner object name console. So we have console.nextInt, and we enter the size of the array. So next time we can create our array or declare array name list. Now, instead of using the value, we are using the variable array size, because the array size is the variable that we declare and we assign the size to it. Now, next we go through the array initialization during declaration. Another option is we can declare an array we don't need to specify the size, and we can straight use the assignment operator and initialize or give a value to all the elements in the array. Or we may give to some and we may not give. For example, if we have, let's say 10 items and we assign 9 values, then the last one left will be the default value. So if the default value is 0, then 0 will go there. So here we have 12.25. That will be the first value in the array. Again, the array name is cells. We have 32.50, 16.90, 23, then 45.68. 23 should be, again, a double data type. As we said earlier, an array, all the elements must be the same type. So here we call the values the initial values. And these are placed between the braces and separated by columns. So we have our curly brace, each value, comma, and a space. After the value, comma, then space. So now this tells us that the first item, which the index will be 0, the value is 12.25. The second item with index 1, the value is 32.50, etc. So the third item, index 2, the value will be 16.90. So also we know array size always is determined by the number of initial values within the braces. If we use this method, again, we don't need to specify the size. So this means the size is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 items. So if an array is declared and also initialized simultaneously, we do not use the operator new to instantiate the array object. Here we don't need it. So next is the arrays and the instant variables length. So in Java, the length normally will give us the size of the array. When we say the size of the array, we mean the number of elements in the array. So here we say a public instant variable length is associated with each array that has been instantiated. So length always contains the size of the array. And also length can be directly accessed in a program using array name and a dot operator. So this statement again creates the array list of 6 components and initialize the component using the values given. So if in our previous, for example, I create an array name list and the size is 6, then if I enter list.length, it will return 6 for us. As we said, the length is a special variable that returns the size of the array. So we must start with the array name object, then period length. So this is our array name list. We have 6 items. So if I say list.length, it will return 6, which is the size of the array. Now next, we are going to learn how to create the array num list of 10 components and also initialize each component to 0. So this is it. Int, the array name is num list. We use the keyword new because we are not initializing the array with values. Then we have int 10. So this 10 tells us the size of the array. So again, if we write an expression num list.length, it will return 10, which is the size of the array. So again, next, the statement store 5, 10, 15, and 20, respectively, in the first 4 components of num list. Why the first 4 components? Because we have index 0. So index 0 is the first item. The second item will be 1, 2, 3. So here we are using assignment operator to assign values to the array. Now, if the array size is very big, let's say we have 50 items, the size is 50, it will take very long to use assignment operator and assign value to individual component or element in the array. So in this case, we are going to use a loop. And the most common loop we use to, for example, initialize items in an array will be for loop. Now, let's say we have numbers in an array. We want to add all the numbers. We can also use a for loop. So we can use the for loop to go through the elements or the components in an array. So here we are going to process one-dimensional array. And as we said earlier, loops are normally used to step through elements in an array and perform the operations. So for example, here we have an array named list again. The size is 100. Well, if I want to initialize each element or component in an array to a specific value, it means I have to write the assignment operator 100 times, which is too much and takes time. So in this case, we are going to use the for loop. The index, or in this case, the variable count, the variable name here is I, will count all the execution of the loop. So we start from 0. Says index start from 0. And we say I is less than the length, list.length. So for example, as we said earlier, if the array size is 10, the index will go from 0 to 9. So that's why we start from 0 and we end at I is less than list.length. So if the size is 7, then we go up to 6. Then we increment our loop. So from here, we can process our array. For example, here the name of the array is list. Either we initialize some values to it, or we want to find the sum of all the elements in it, if there's an element, or we want to find the greatest or the smallest, the largest element in the array. All this we can use the for loop. So the first example here is that we are trying to enter values, initialize the elements in the array. So we use the for loop from 0 to list.length. So again, if the size is 10, we go from 0 to 9. Then we use our scanner object console.nestInt to ask the user to enter value into the array element. So this, if for example, the size is 10, then this loop will run 10 times from 0 to 9. And each run, it gives us option to use our keyboard to enter value into the array. Now, the next one is if I want to print all the elements in the array. So again, I start from beginning. So 0, and I'll go till the end, list.length. So if it's 10 items again, I'll go from 0 to 9. Then each time we go through the loop, we print the elements. So we are going to print from beginning. So begin our index is 0, so we're going to print the first item. We increment by 1. We print the second item until we reach, if the size is 10, until we reach 10, the loop will stop. So we print everything from 0 to 9. Again, the length variable here return the size. And when we say the size of the array, it means the number of items inside the array. So we have another loop here. And in this loop, as we said earlier, we can use it to process all the elements in an array, as we said earlier. So from 0 to list.length. So we get our input. It will allow us to go through all the elements in the array from 0. So the counter is as we said earlier, counting the position. That's the index 0, 1, 2 up to there. So these are some of the operations on an array. We can use, as we saw, for loop to initialize all the components in the array. Also, we can input a data. We can also output a stored data. And as we said earlier, we can also find the largest, smallest, sum, average of the elements of the values in the array. Either all of them, or we can specify the size. For example, we have array, the size is 100. we want to find the sum of the first 20 values. We can do that. So here we have an array named cells. The size is 10. And this is our index variable. And we declare variable name largest cell. Here we are going to store the largest value in the array. And the sum variable will sum all the values in the array. And also the average variable, we are going to store the average value of the element in the array. So first we initialize our array to a specific value, let's say 10. This means all the elements in the array will start from 10, all the value will be 10. So we can see again for loop, the index starts from 0, then index less than cells.length. Again, the length variable gives us the size of the array. So if the size of the array is 10, then we go from 0 to 9, which is still 10. So each run of the loop, we are going to initialize the elements in the array with 10. So this means after we finish, we are going to assign 10 to all the elements in the array. Now this is a code to read data into array. So we can use the scanner object. And here we should assume we have a scanner object named console. So every run of the loop, which we start from again, there's 0 to size -1. Every run of the loop, we are going to ask the user using keyboard to enter value into the array, the index position. So the goal here again is to enter data into the array. This is to print an item in array. So every run in the loop, we have system.out.print, which will print the values in the array. Again, the index starts from 0, so we start from beginning of the array. Now we can start the index from 5 or any position in the array. The next is to find the sum and also the average of elements in the array. So here we declare our sum variable initialized to 0, make sure it's empty, there's nothing. So we start from index again 0 to the index less than size and the size -1 or cells.length, which will be the size of the array -1. So every run of the loop, we are going to add the value or the element content into the sum variable. That's why we start from 0. So first we have 0 plus the first element, and the answer will be our new sum. When we increment our counter, the loop counter or variable to 2, then we go to the second value, we add it to the previous sum, we have new sum. 3, we add a 3 to the sum, the old sum, then we get a new sum to the end of it. Now, next is to find the average. So first we find the sum. So if we have the sum, then we are good to go. But first, we want to make sure that there's values in the array, because if there's no any value in the array, then the size or the count will be 0. Any value divided by 0, again, we may have error. So here, first thing we do, we say the array cells.length, which is the size of the array. If it's not equal to 0, then let's find the average. If it's equal to 0, then let's assign 0 to the average. Because if there's no any element in the array, it means the sum will be 0. Divided 0 by nothing, so we divide by 0 also. So next is find the largest element in an array. Normally, when we are writing this code, the first item in the array should be the maximum. Now, if we have an array and the size is only 1 and we have only 1 item, then that item will be the maximum item. Also, it will be the minimum item if we are looking for the minimum, or if we are looking for any minimum, maximum, etc. So this means we have an item in an array. The first item, we assume that is the mass. Now, before we go into the loop, because when we have more than one item, loop is the best way to go through the items. So that's why here we start the index from 1 because we took the first value out already and we say that is the mass index. So next we take the value of 1. Then we say that the condition will be if we haven't reached the last item in the array, and we know the last item in the array will be index less than cells.length. Cells.length is the same as saying array size minus 1. Because if their size is 10, I'll go up to 9. But since we start from 0, so we still get the 10 items. So next, we take our mass index and we say if the cell's mass index is less than the cell's index, which is the next one, if it's less, then what we do, we are going to assign the index to the mass index, which means the second item is bigger than the first item. So we'll go through all the items in the array, and then whichever is the largest, we are going to assign it to the largest cell variable. And then if we need to print it, then we can print it. So next thing we should know is what we call the array index out of bound. Now, since we know that the array index always starts from 0, the maximum will be the size minus 1. So any value that is less than 0, or any value that is greater than the maximum item in the array, the size of the array minus 1, then we say the index is out of bound. So index can never be a negative value, at least start from 0. And it always ends at the size minus 1 because index starts from 0. And also Java comes with a special exception handling package. And here we have array index out of bound exception can be thrown. So next is declare arrays as formal parameters to methods. So sometimes we may have a method and the parameter of the method instead of being variable, which is what we are doing ever since program Java. Now we can have argument as array. So normally when you have argument as array, we can have the array name type with a square bracket open and close. Then we have an int variable. Since the index is always a whole number from 0 to any value, there's no decimal. So here we are going to use the variable name num to specify the location, the index of the array, or the size of the array. So here, the method name is array as formal parameter. Then we open parentheses, we close parentheses, we have the array name, which is list A, and the type is int. Then we have a second array, list B. The type or data type in the list B array is double. Then we have int num. This num again tells us the size of the array. So that's why it's int. So next we declare our array name int list. The size is 10. Same thing, we can declare an array name double num list. So we have to specify the size is double. So we have new double 15, which means if we create the array object double num list, we may have 15 items, positions to store data. So we can also use the assignment operators for assigning values to array components or elements. So for example, here we have a list A, which is our first array, then list B, our second array. We assign the values or we initialize our first array, but our second array is 0 throughout, which means we haven't used a unique value yet. So we have an option. We can set list B equal to list A, which means we are assigning the values in list A to list B. Now, when we execute this, remember list A is the first array. It has values. So we are assigning the values to list B. The size of the array is the same. And also the data type is the same. So we can do this operation. So when we do this operation, we can see that list A value now is the same as list B because we assign list B to list A. So all the values of list A will be the same in list B. Now, we use the for loop. Since again, the size is at least more than 5, 10. So we have for loop, we start the index from 0. We say index is less than list.length, which is list A.length, the size. Then we increment each one. Then here we assign the list A. If the index starts from 0, then we say list A, first item 0, we assign it to list B. The index C also be 0. So we assign the value. So we can also use the relational operators in array. So we say the expression list A equal to list B. Here we want to check and see if the element in list A is the same element in list B, then they are equal. So we are using the relational operator equal, equal. And one single equal means assignment operator, assigning value from left to right. But two assignment operator means we are checking if a specific variable, in this case array, have the same element or size of the second array, which is list B. Now, to determine whether list A and list B contain the same element, we can also compare them component by component. What we mean, index 0 is equal to list A, index 0 equal to list B, index 0. Is list A index 1 value equal to list B index 1 value. So then we can compare them by using the assignment operator. So we need to check also the size is the same. Now, if you have two arrays and the size are different, then they are not equal. One will have more values than the other. So when we are checking if two arrays are equal, the first thing we check is the size of the array. So next here we have is equal array method. It takes two arguments. So here our goal is to compare if these two arrays are the same. So it takes two arguments, first array and second array, the same data type. So the first thing we do, we say that if the first array dot length not equal to the second array dot length, this statement we are checking if the two array have the same size. So here we are saying the first array is not equal to second array, which means they don't have the same size. Then we return false because they cannot be equal. So before two array will be equal, their size must be the same. Other than that, if it's not false, then we move to the next line. So we go through the index from 0, which is the first element in the array named first array. The next is our condition here, we go up to the size of the array minus 1. And every round we are going to increment our index by 1. So our condition here is that if the first array index is not equal to the second array index, then we return false, which means the two arrays are not the same. Also, if the size is not the same, we also return false because they are not the same. Other than that, this means they are equal. First array index is equal to the second array index, which will be false because not equal means true. Then we'll return true if the condition is false. So this is a method for array processing. Here we want to fill an array, so we have a method named fill array. It takes argument of the array name list, and also we have a variable, the number of elements. That is the second variable, will be the size of the array. So we start the index from 0, we declare our index variable outside, then we start from 0 to the index less than the number of elements. So if, again, as we said, if the size is 10, we go from 0 to, again, 9. So this will allow us to enter values into the array. So console.nestInt make it possible for us to use a keyboard to input a data. So this will occur one at a time since we are in the for loop. Let's say if the size is 10, then we go from 0 to 9. because the index should be index less than 10, so which means we go up to 9. Then each run, we print the elements, any position we are again. The counter is the index of the array, the position. So in the position we reach, there's values, we print it. Now, next also is a method for array processing. Here, we saw this code before, how to print elements in an array. So we have a method, print array. It will take the array name, which is list, and the data type of the array. And our second variable will be the size of the array or number of elements. Here we are printing. So we can have a for loop start from index 0 up to the last item in the array. Last item in the array is size -1. Or we use the length. Let's say the array name is list, so list dot length. The index should be less than list dot length. So with that, we use the system.out to print everything. Now, if we want to sum it, we also have the for loop. Each run, we add it to our previous sum. The sum will start from 0. And then the first element, whatever the value is, we add it to 0. So that will be our new sum. We'll increment the index by 1. So we move to second position. Same thing, we sum it, then move to third position until we add all the elements in the array. Also, we can find the largest value or item in an array using the index large element. We saw this code also. So here we declare our index variable, then mass index. This will tell us the maximum value. So if we have 10 values, the first value should be maximum, then we compare with the second. If the first and second, the first one is maximum, we still keep the first one, then we compare with the third one. Now, if the third one is maximum, then we ignore the one. Now we have a new maximum, which is 3. So that's what we are doing here with the for loop, going through the item from 0 to the end. So when we go through the first, we check list mass index less than list index. If it's true, then we assign the list index to mass index, which means we get a new large value. If it's false, then we skip. We don't assign a new index when, again, the mass index is greater. So if the index is less than the mass index, then we keep mass index. So return mass index. But if index is greater, then we assign that index as a mass index now. As we said, we can use the assignment operator to copy item in one array to the other. If I'm writing the method, since I'm copying, I'm not expecting no returning value, so it's void. Here we are expecting int as a returning value because of the index is int. And so here we start with the for loop from 0 to less than the size of the array. So again, if it's 10, we go from 0 to 9. Every run of the loop, the for loop, we are going to copy list 1 item to list 2 item. We start from 0. So 0 position, we copy, move to 1, we copy till the end of it. So next we discuss what we call the parallel arrays. So here we say arrays are parallel if the corresponding component hold related information. So we have 2 items and one hold one information. So example, array also, array of objects. We can use array to manipulate objects. So create an array name array1 with n object of type T. This is generic T type. So the array name is array1. The size is uppercase N. Now we can instantiate array1 as follows. So we have for loop starting from 0, then less than the size -1, which is array1.length. Less than the size, or array1.length. Then we increment. Here we are using the new keyword. That's why we say instantiating array. to, again, instantiate the array. So we also can have array of strings objects. For example, we have array name list. The size is 5, and the data type is strings. So you can take Amanda Green, VJ, Orala, Charlie, Man, etc., because these are all strings. As we know already, strings have to be on double quotation. So this is the string object, the name list. The size is 5, so we go from 0 to 4. And this is the values or the names that we assign to each index of the array. So this is another example. We have an array name Arava Time Employee. The type is clock. So this is like using a class name. So the type is clock. This will be a user-defined class name. And we call the constructor, default constructor clock. And here we are creating an array with a size 100. So the index will start from 0 to 99. We did not yet initialize it, but by initialization, we have a default constructor clock. So whatever the default value is in the clock class, that's the value they are going to use to initialize it. So example here, we have a for loop, j equal to 0, which index always start from 0. Then j should be less than Arava time employee dot length. So this will give us the size of the array, and we increment. So we know we may have the class name clock. The 3 instance variables will be the hours, minutes, and seconds. So anytime we create an object, it may have all those 3 instant variables. So this concept here is somewhat same as object-oriented programming concept we are applying here. So we instantiate array object, and also we set the time to 8, 5, 10. So the second, you can see Arava time 49. So the index 49, which will be the 50th position. We assign or set the time to 8, 5, 10. Now the array and variable length parameter list, as we said earlier, we always have a special variable length that will give us the size of the array, the number of elements. Also, we can have arrays and variable length as a parameter list. An example is we have a method named largest. The data type should be the array name, comma, and also the num list, which in this case would be our variable that tells us the size of the array. So here we have a method named mass, the index, and also we say if the num list.length not equal to 0, then we can do our calculation, do whatever we want to do. So here we are finding the largest value. So we assign the first item to mass. Then we start going through the second item, which will be from 1. Then each loop, we're going to check if the mass is less than the mass list index, or the mass equal to mass list index. If it is, then we keep we get the new index because we're looking for mass. So we are going to return the mass. If not, then we'll return 0.0. This is array and also variable length parameter list, as we saw earlier. So for example, here we declare num1 as double. We call the largest method with 34 and 56. So that will return one item that is largest, in this case will be 56. And we also have a number list array. We have all these items, and we are going to again initialize. This is basically means we are initializing the array name number list. Anytime we are using assignment operator to initialize it, as we see now, we don't need to specify the size of the array. The size of the array is irrelevant. Also, we have a special loop, special for loop, which we call the for each loop. This loop main goal or objective is to be able to go through a list of items. So we're also going to apply it here. So for example, here we say the syntax to use for loop to process elements of an array is for loop. We have data type, identifier, column, then array name, state, then the statement, whatever. This is again the concept of using the for each loop. The identifier is a variable, and the data type of identifier is the same as the data type of the array. As we said, array values are the same data type. So I have a sum variable, I initialize it to 0, and I have a variable named num. The reason why num is double because the values or the items in the array, they are double. So always your num variable should be the same data type as the array items, because you are going to use this num variable to go through the items in the array. So automatically we're going to start from 1, which is 0. The position 1 is the index is 0, and we had all the values. Again, we can use the for loop for this, and we can use the for each loop, as we can see. We also have a 2-dimensional array. So data sometimes is stored like a table. We have rows and columns. Now, if you have a 2-dimensional array, then again, we need 2 indexes. The first index is always the size of the row, and the second index will be the size of the column. So 2-dimensional array make it possible to store data more or less like a table. So we can use to specify the size. The size can be different because we may have a matrix, same concept as this. If a matrix size is 4 by 10, it means we have 4 rows, 10 columns. Or it can be opposite, 10 rows and 4 columns. So the size doesn't matter, it can be any size. So we'll see examples soon. With a 2-dimensional array, we can specify different number of columns for each row. This is called the rank arrays. What you mean is that first column can have only 2, the first row can have only 3 columns, and the next row will have 10 columns. So all of them will have the same number of columns. So we say we can specify different number of columns for each row. Also, 3 ways to process 2-dimensional arrays. We can do an entire array, or we can do a particular row of an array, which is called the row processing, or particular column of array, which we call the column processing. So the processing algorithm is similar to processing algorithm of 1-dimensional array. The only difference, again, we need 2 loops, one for the row and one for the columns. So this is how a cells array 2-dimension will look. More or less a table, the rows and the columns. This means the index, the first size always is the row. The second will be the column, same as matrix. The first index in the matrix is always a row, and the second is the column. So here we say cells 5 and 3, which means we go to number 6 position of the row, and then the 4th column. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 4th column, and the row will be 6. So from 0 to 5, we have 6. So we can see the process is almost the same as 1-dimension or single array. It's almost the same. The only thing, as we can see here, if we want to initialize the 2-dimensional array, we need 2 for loops, one for the rows and one for the columns. Print also the same concept, the first for the row, another for loop for the column. This means, since the first for loop is for row index, It means beginning, we have to, if we are storing data, we have to go through row by row. Because if this row is true, we go to the column. Before we come out of column and go back to row, we have to go through all the column and we reach the end. Then we move back to the outer loop. Now, when the outer loop, which is the row loop, reaches matrix.length, then we stop. So normally we can fill by columns. Also here we have to input data into a two-dimensional array. So we can see matrix, rows, and column. We ask the user to enter the values. Since we are using two for loop, we'll surely get two values for the row and the column. And here we are going to sum everything, all the values in the array, and assign it to the sum variable. So we'll make sure we start from 0, which is the sum. Then the column always the index, so start from 0 to the matrix row dot length, the size of the row. So we can also sum by column. So in this case, we can see that the column counter, the for loop counter variable is first. Previously, we go row by row, so row is first. Now we go by columns. So when we get into the first column, which is 0, we'll go through the column to the end. So this will take us to the second loop, which is row. So that will make it possible to go through row by row. Since we have only one column, you see we're going row by row, only one value at a time. Then whatever we are doing here, in this case, we want to add all the elements. So we have a sum equal to sum plus matrix, row, and column. So every round of the position here, we are going to add it to the previous sum. So that's two-dimensional array to find the largest element in each row. So we have a variable named largest. We assign the first item. So matrix row 0. We make sure we are in the first column, then the row. So we go through the column by column. So our first for loop is for the column. We don't really, here we are looking for the largest element in each row. So we don't need to go through columns. We go by the row. So if I'm in the first row, I'll start from 0 column. First row have first, second, third, fourth column. So that's why the second index will be changing. That's what will be increment here. We are still in the same row because here we are looking for the largest element in each row. Now, if we are looking for largest element in the whole values, in this case, the whole matrix 2 by 2 table, then we need 2 for loop. One will go through by column, one will go through by the rows. So again, largest element in each column 2 is the same. Now we're doing opposite of row. So we can see our counter in the first for loop, the counter variable is column. The row will stay. Now we go through the rows now. Here we are looking for each element in each column. So when we reach the first row, we go through all the items. Then when we come out of the loop, increment by 1, which is the outside loop, and go through the same process. So first, we start column to the end. We assign the first item, that's first row in the column, to largest. Then we go through the row, second item, until the size -1, which is matrix.length. Now, so we say that if the largest is less than the matrix row column, and largest equal to matrix row column, then we say the largest element of the column will be column +1. Then plus the largest. So we can also have a multi-dimensional array, which is more than 2. In this case, if we have 3, 4, we should have the same amount of loops. So for example, here we have data type, we have 3 items. We have to specify the 3 index item if we are initializing it. If you want to use the loop tool, we can see for loop 3, each for loop for each position of the item. So we may have 3 dimensions. And we can see the size is specified for us here. Excuse me, 10, 5, 7. So the first loop will go up to 10 from 0 to 9. Second, we go up to 5, 0 to 4. And the last one, we go up to 7, 0 to 6. So here, what we are doing, we are initializing all the values to 10. So this will be the conclusion of our array. In this lectures, again, we go through array, simple array, and then 2-dimension, and also possible multi-dimensions. So wish everybody the best. Again, thank you for your time.